You probably know the story of an old fellow named Zeke who lived in Georgia on the banks of a river. Zeke was a faithful man, prayed to God every day. Well, one particular day, Zeke and all his townsfolk received word that a storm was coming and that to save themselves, they'd better evacuate. Well, Zeke would have none of it. He knew that God would save him. So he went out and he sat on his covered porch in his rocking chair and watched as the rain began to fall. All around him, his townsfolk were scurrying around getting ready to leave. And as the sun began to set, a police car came by and said, "You know, Zeke, it's time to go. Everybody's leaving. We're the last car. Hop in. We'll take you to safety." But Zeke said, "Nope, I'm fine. God will take care of me. You go on your way." So the police car left. Well, the rain started falling harder and harder. The water started rising and the river overflowed the banks. Soon the water was up to the first floor of Zeke's house, and he had to go up to the second floor. There, by the window, he watched as the rain came down harder still, and he prayed. He said, "Dear God, it's me, Zeke, your most faithful servant. I'm waiting on you to save me now." Well, just that moment, a Coast Guard cutter pulled up. Man behind the wheel hollered, "Lower the window, I'm going to toss you a line. You hop in the water, grab the line, we'll pull you." Zeke said, No, you go on your way. I'm fine. God will see to my safety." So the boat pulled off. Rain fell harder. The water rose higher. Zeke climbed up to the roof. He had no choice now. The rain was pelting him in the face, and he prayed aloud, and he said, "God, time's getting tight. I need that miracle. Where are you?" Just then a helicopter flies overhead. Pilot drops a rope, says, "Grab onto the rope, we'll lift you." Zeke said, No, I'm fine. God will protect me. You go on your way." So the chopper flew off. Well, the water kept rising, and sadly, Zeke drowned. He entered heaven, and he had an audience with God, and he said, "God, I just don't understand it. I pray every day. Where were you when I needed you?" And God said, "Son, I sent you a police car. I sent you a Coast Guard cutter, and I sent you a helicopter. I'm not sure what more you want." I'll return to the story. Those of you with whom I've studied modern Jewish thought have heard me speak of Hermann Cohn, the neo-Kantian German philosopher who wrote and taught at the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century. Immanuel Kant, from whom he learned, said that humanity can never really understand the way the world works. The best that we can ever hope to do is understand the way the human mind thinks about the world. And Kant said that we draw conclusions about the world based on repeated patterns of experience. And Kant said we think about the world in three particular areas: aesthetics, beauty; science, or nature; and ethics, moral decision-making. Hermann Cohn adopted those divisions of thought, and he focused particularly on science and on ethics. And like Immanuel Kant before him, Cohn said that in both of those areas, we attempt to develop universal laws. So for example, in the realm of science or nature, there are universal laws like force equals mass times acceleration, or E equals mc squared, or the laws of gravity. And in the realm of ethics, we also attempt to develop universal laws, moral codes, with commandments like "thou shalt not murder" or "thou shalt not steal." But there's an essential difference between these two types of universal laws. The laws of science or nature are predictive, descriptive, and they're pretty good. If I drop something, I know that 10 times out of 10, it's going to hit the ground. The laws of ethics are not descriptive. They're prescriptive. They prescribe the way human beings ought to act, the choices we ought to make in certain situations. And there's another essential difference between these two realms. The laws of nature are not ethical. Gravity is not ethical. Gravity won't cease to pull a building down with its corrupted foundations just because the people who live there will be left homeless. So Cohn identified these two spheres, science and nature on the one hand, and ethics, moral decision-making on the other, and he said at no point do those two spheres overlap. But Hermann Cohn didn't experience the way we have experienced the world. I would suggest, in fact, that there are certain areas where ethics and nature do overlap. All we need do is consider some of the events of this past week. Think about the tornadoes that swept through a large swath of this country. Whether directly or indirectly, scientists have told us that our own human action on the world has created a climate where such storms are more and more likely to occur. We've forgotten the psalmist's admonition that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, or the instructions of Genesis that God gave us the earth to till and tend, nurture, and protect. And then there's COVID, and how the divisive politics of this country have made vaccines and masks into political statements. This past week, the 800,000th American perished from COVID. Certainly some of those deaths were preventable through our own actions if we had taken them. Rabbi Harold Kushner, author of the landmark book When Bad Things Happen to Good People, taught that there are two forms of what he called biblical kryptonite, two forces against which even God is powerless to act: human free will and also the laws of nature. Put those two forces together, and terrible tragedies can certainly unfold. But that doesn't mean that God is absent from ethics or absent from nature. And so I return to the story, because perhaps it's God who inspires us toward acts of compassion, to reach out to those who are suffering, as so many have to the victims of the tornadoes this past week, as Temple Emanu-El has through an organization called the Afia Foundation, as so many of you have. And maybe it's God who inspires us to become doctors and nurses, to care for those who are suffering, and scientists to seek out treatments and cures. And maybe it's God who inspires in each of us the ability to persevere through life's most difficult and frightening moments. This week we conclude the book of Genesis. And as we conclude Genesis and every book of Torah, we recite the words Chazak, Chazak, V'nit Chazek. Be strong, and we will strengthen one another. Those words are actually on the billboard on the corner of 65th Street and 5th Avenue. We put them there in March of 2020, during the pandemic's first, darkest days. Sadly, now we are experiencing frightening days once again. But just as we persevered through those first dark moments, so we will persevere through these. We will lean on each other, as we always have, and we will find in ourselves that strength that God has given us. Chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek. Be strong, be strong. We will strengthen one another. Amen.